Why they don't notice you, the Stoic solution. Have you ever walked into a room and felt as though you didn't exist? You speak, but no one listens. You work hard, but no one notices. You stand among friends, colleagues, or even family, and yet a strange veil of invisibility seems to cover you. This feeling is heavier than silence. It's the weight of being overlooked. It is one of the most quietly painful struggles a human can face. To be unseen is to feel unvalued, and to feel unvalued is to question whether you matter at all. The truth is, you are not alone. This struggle is not new, and it is not yours alone to bear. Throughout history, countless men and women have endured the ache of invisibility, often in moments when they had much to offer, but no one seemed willing to see it. Even emperors, philosophers, and kings wrestled with this. Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in the Roman world, wrote words not for applause, not for recognition, but for himself. Imagine that. The Emperor of Rome, surrounded by senators and servants, still felt compelled to remind himself that the opinion of the crowd did not define his worth. The sting of being ignored is not found in the silence itself, but in the meaning we attach to it. When people pass us by without a glance, when our work is dismissed without acknowledgement, we feel stripped of identity. We tell ourselves stories. Perhaps I'm not good enough. Perhaps I don't matter. Perhaps I was foolish to think I could stand out. But here is where Stoicism offers its first medicine. The Stoics would remind us that the pain does not come from the world failing to see us. It comes from our expectation that the world should. Think about that carefully. You long for recognition because you believe it will give you strength. But if your strength depends on another person's eyes, what happens when those eyes turn away? You become weaker, more desperate, more enslaved. The Stoics knew that this hunger for validation is the chain that binds the human spirit. They knew that a person could be surrounded by applause and still feel empty, or be entirely ignored and still stand with unshakable dignity. Let us imagine for a moment the life of Epictetus. He was born into slavery, a man of no status, no freedom, no recognition. He was property, not person. Who looked at him? Who honored him? Who listened? Almost no one. And yet, within him burned a mind and a soul that would shape the world for centuries. He did not wait for others to notice his brilliance. He forged it in silence. His words, carried down through the ages, now reach us more clearly than the voices of kings. This is the paradox. Those who chase attention rarely gain respect, and those who cultivate strength within themselves often shine without asking. The Stoic solution begins here, by shifting the question from "why don't they notice me?" to "why do I need them to?" That question is sharper than a blade, because it cuts away illusions. It forces you to confront the truth that your worth does not rise or fall with the crowd's awareness. And yet, this is not to say that being overlooked is easy. It is not. It can hollow you out. It can make you doubt. But perhaps the struggle itself is the test. Perhaps invisibility is the training ground where true strength is born. The oak tree does not demand that the forest recognize it. It simply grows, and its presence becomes undeniable. In the same way, the Stoic path does not ask you to demand notice. It asks you to build yourself into something so steady, so grounded, so radiant with virtue, that whether people notice or not becomes irrelevant. If you feel unseen today, know this. The world has always overlooked greatness until it could no longer ignore it. Your task is not to shout louder nor to beg for attention, but to build a life so aligned with truth and virtue that even silence cannot diminish you. This is where our journey begins, the hidden struggle of invisibility and the Stoic answer that transforms it from a curse into a crucible. The Stoics often spoke of the mind as a mirror. Not a mirror that reflects back the world's judgment, but a mirror that allows you to see yourself as you truly are. Marcus Aurelius, in his Meditations, wrote page after page, not to impress the Senate, not to inspire the soldiers under his command, not to be remembered as a wise emperor, but to remind himself of the truth. His writings were never meant for the public eye. They were letters to his own soul, a mirror in which he could examine his thoughts and measure his life against his own principles. That is the essence of the Stoic mirror. Your worth is not determined by whether others notice you, but by whether you see yourself clearly. When you look into this mirror, what do you see? Do you see a person defined by applause or silence? Do you see someone enslaved to the opinions of others? Or do you see a being grounded in values, unshaken whether the crowd cheers or walks away? The Stoic would say that the only reflection that matters is the one in your own mind. Recognition is not the light that illuminates you. Virtue is. Consider Epictetus again, a man who began his life in chains. Society gave him no recognition. He was dismissed as nothing more than property, a body to be used at the will of another. And yet, even in that state, he found a freedom deeper than any master could take away. He looked not to the crowd for affirmation, but inward, into the mirror of his soul. He asked himself, "Am I living according to reason? Am I in harmony with nature? Am I choosing courage over fear?" The answers to these questions gave him a radiance that time has never dimmed. This is why the Stoics never obsessed over reputation. Seneca wrote that the respect of others is not in our control. He warned against chasing it because to depend on what is outside your control is to live in constant anxiety. Imagine building your entire life on the shifting sands of others' opinions. Today they cheer, tomorrow they mock, and the next day they forget. If that is the foundation of your identity, you will collapse with every change of the wind. The mirror teaches you something stronger, that it is enough to be aligned with truth. If you have acted with justice, if you have shown courage, if you have lived with temperance, if you have sought wisdom, then it does not matter whether the crowd recognizes it. You know, your soul knows, and that knowledge is worth more than 1,000 empty compliments. There is a quiet power in this kind of self-recognition. Think of Marcus Aurelius, writing by lamplight in his tent during the wars along the Danube. Surrounded by soldiers, enemies, politics and turmoil, he did not write words like a ruler hungry for fame. He wrote as a student, reminding himself of what is true. His mirror was clear. He could see his flaws, his fears, and his strengths. He knew the applause of Rome could not save him from death, nor shield him from suffering. Only the discipline of his own mind could do that. This is the lesson. When the world ignores you, it is not a tragedy, it is an invitation to look into the mirror of your own soul and ask, what do I see? Am I living as I should? Am I becoming someone I myself can respect? If you can answer yes, then you are free. For what greater recognition is there than to be at peace with yourself? The Stoic mirror is not about vanity. It is about clarity. It strips away the illusions of fame and reputation and brings you face to face with what truly matters. And when you cultivate this vision, something remarkable happens. You stop chasing notice, and ironically, people begin to notice you. Not because you begged for attention, but because presence is magnetic when it comes from within. Those who no longer need recognition often command it the most. So the next time you feel invisible, turn inward. Ask yourself what the mirror shows. Do not polish the surface for others' eyes. Polish it for your own, until what you see is steady, grounded, and true. That is the vision the Stoics trusted. That is the vision that will make you unshaken, even in a world that looks past you. Why do we ache so deeply for recognition? Why does the silence of others feel heavier than their criticism? The answer lies in our nature. From birth, we are social creatures. We depend on our parents' gaze for survival, on our community's approval for safety, and on the group's acceptance for belonging. To be ignored once meant danger, isolation, and even death. Somewhere deep inside us, this ancient fear still lingers. When we are not noticed, the primitive mind whispers, "You are alone, you are unsafe, you are unworthy." This craving for recognition is woven into the fabric of our biology, but Stoicism teaches us that what is natural is not always what is necessary. Just because the body craves does not mean the soul must obey. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that the applause of men was fleeting, and to build one's life upon it was to build on shifting sand. He wrote that even the most famous men are quickly forgotten, their names fading into the dust of history. If Caesar, Alexander, or Cato could vanish into obscurity within a generation, what hope is there for us to be remembered for long? And if the memory of others fades so quickly, why should it matter so much in the present? Yet the hunger remains, and the world we live in feeds it daily. Consider the platforms we carry in our pockets, the endless scroll of images and opinions. Every like, every comment, every share is a tiny jolt of validation, a whisper of recognition. We have become merchants of attention, measuring our worth in numbers that vanish as quickly as they arrive. But this is nothing more than the modern version of the Roman crowd's cheers, the same noise Marcus Aurelius dismissed as hollow. The difference is that today we carry the crowd in our hands. Seneca warned that he who depends on the applause of others has made himself their slave. The more you crave recognition, the more power you give away. You become a puppet pulled by invisible strings, smiling when praised, collapsing when ignored. The Stoic solution is not to pretend we don't care at all, but to place recognition in its proper place. Approval may feel pleasant, but it cannot be the root of our strength. Think of a man who spends years perfecting his craft, pouring his energy into his work. If recognition is his goal, he will despair when no one notices. But if excellence is his goal, if virtue is his aim, then even in silence he is fulfilled. The Stoics teach us to seek mastery of the self, not mastery over the opinions of others. The one you must impress is not the crowd, but your own reason. Let us ask ourselves directly, whose approval enslaves you right now? Is it the attention of colleagues who never truly understand you? Is it the validation of strangers on a screen who know nothing of your life? Is it the recognition of family members who perhaps will never see you as you wish to be seen? The moment you can name the master, you can begin to free yourself from the chains. We crave recognition because it feels like proof that we matter. But the Stoics flip this illusion on its head. They say that you matter because you exist, because you are a rational being capable of virtue, because you have within you the power to choose courage, justice, temperance, and wisdom in every moment. You do not need applause to confirm this. You need only the discipline to see it for yourself. Epictetus taught his students to imagine life as a play. You have been given a role, perhaps great, perhaps small. It does not matter if you stand at the center of the stage or in the shadows at the edge. What matters is how well you perform your role. The applause of the audience is irrelevant. The actor's duty is to play his part with excellence. So too with life. You may not be noticed by many or even by anyone, but if you live in harmony with reason and virtue, your performance is flawless. The desire for recognition is not evil. It is simply misplaced when it becomes our master. To crave notice is to hunger for something beyond our control, to cultivate presence, to radiate character, to act with integrity, regardless of who is watching. That is within our power. When you shift your focus from being seen to being true, you no longer chase recognition. Instead, you embody something far greater. And here lies the irony. Those who release the need to be noticed are often those who are remembered most. Socrates walked barefoot through Athens, unconcerned with status, unconcerned with reputation. He pursued truth, not applause. Yet thousands of years later, his name endures, while the names of those who mocked him have turned to dust. The Stoics understood this paradox well. Stop seeking recognition, and you will cultivate the very presence that cannot be ignored. The hunger for recognition is more than a desire, it is a set of invisible chains. They are not forged of iron or steel, but of opinion and expectation. They are chains that weigh down the spirit, yet cannot be seen by the eye. You may appear free to the world, yet inside you are shackled to the judgments of others. When someone praises you, you feel lifted. When they ignore you, you feel crushed. Your emotions rise and fall like a puppet on strings, and the puppeteer is never you. Picture a man who spends years working tirelessly in his craft. He wakes early, he sacrifices much, he gives his energy to creation and service. And yet, when no one applauds, he despairs. His sense of worth collapses. He asks, "What was it all for if no one noticed?" In that moment, the truth is revealed. He has built his life not on virtue, but on recognition. And when recognition does not arrive, he feels as though he has nothing. His life, though rich in effort, becomes poor in freedom. The Stoics would call this slavery of the soul. For what is slavery if not the surrender of your freedom to another? And when your peace depends on whether others see you, you have surrendered the most sacred of freedoms. Epictetus, who knew the literal chains of slavery, understood this with clarity. He taught that a man is not free because of his station, nor enslaved because of his bonds, but free when he is master of his own mind. The invisible chains of recognition are often heavier than the iron ones, because you carry them even when you appear unbound. Marcus Aurelius warned himself repeatedly not to be trapped by what others say or think. He reminded himself that reputation is fickle, that even the wisest and most powerful are quickly forgotten. He wrote, "It is not what they say, but what you are." That single sentence cuts through the fog. The chains dissolve the moment you remember that your being, your actions, and your choices hold more weight than the shallow noise of approval or silence. Think of how many people live their lives chasing these chains. They adjust their speech to please the room, even when truth demands silence. They shape their actions to gain applause, even when conscience resists. They sacrifice authenticity for attention, and in doing so, they bind themselves tighter. The tragedy is not that others fail to notice them. The tragedy is that they fail to notice themselves. But the Stoic path is one of liberation. To walk it requires courage, because it means facing the loneliness of obscurity without fear. It means creating, speaking, and living not for the eyes of others, but for the standard of virtue. Justice, courage, temperance, wisdom, these are not awarded by the crowd. They are awarded by your own soul. When you place these above recognition, you begin to feel the chains slip from your wrists. Let us return to the man who despairs because no one noticed his work. If he were to look at his life through the Stoic lens, he would ask a different question. Did I act with excellence? Did I strive toward truth? Did I give my best in alignment with reason? If the answer is yes, then whether the world was silent or loud is irrelevant. His freedom rests in the act itself, not in the response it receives. These invisible chains can be broken, but only by an inner revolution. No one else can free you. The recognition you crave will never arrive in the measure you desire, and even if it does, it will never satisfy. The applause of today fades with the setting sun. Tomorrow, the crowd will demand something new, and you will be left hungry again. The Stoics teach us that true freedom comes only when you no longer depend on the noise of the crowd. When you anchor your life in virtue, silence itself becomes applause enough. The world may never notice you, but if you notice yourself, if you live with integrity regardless of who is watching, then you are free. You have broken the invisible chains. And freedom, not recognition, is the true measure of a life well lived. There is a way to be seen without asking, to be heard without shouting, to be remembered without begging for recognition. It is the way of presence. The Stoics knew that true influence is not built on noise, but on substance. Presence is not about the volume of your words, but the weight of your character. It is not about how many eyes turn toward you, but about the impression you leave when they do. Socrates never dressed in finery, never courted status, and often stood in silence longer than most could bear. Yet his presence drew men to him. They felt the gravity of a man who needed nothing from them, a man who carried himself with calm assurance. That kind of presence cannot be faked. It comes only from a soul at peace with itself. The Stoic presence is built not on performance, but on authenticity. Think of the difference between someone who clamors for attention and someone who stands silently with dignity. The first may gather notice for a moment, but the impression fades as quickly as it came. The second may say little, yet their presence lingers because it is anchored in substance. People are drawn to strength that does not need to announce itself. The Stoic understood this and lived accordingly. How does one build such presence? It begins with integrity. Do you act the same when no one is watching as when the world is looking? If your actions are consistent, if your words align with your deeds, you radiate trust. People may not always notice immediately, but when they do, they sense something real, something steady. That steadiness is the root of presence. Courage is another foundation. The one who stands firm in difficulty, who remains calm in the storm, who does not flinch when others scatter, this person is remembered. Presence grows in the soil of adversity, for when others lose their composure, the one who endures shines without effort. Marcus Aurelius endured endless burdens of empire and war, yet he carried himself with poise. His presence was not theatrical. It was born of his refusal to be broken by what he could not control. Temperance also shapes presence. Those who are frantic, impulsive, or desperate rarely command attention for long, but the one who is measured, deliberate, and disciplined exudes authority without speaking a word. Imagine a man who enters a room not with arrogance, but with calm restraint. He does not demand recognition, yet people turn toward him because he emanates balance. The Stoics trained themselves to be such men, not through show, but through the daily discipline of the mind. Wisdom, finally, completes the picture. To speak when necessary, to remain silent when silence teaches more, to offer clarity where there is confusion. This is the presence of the wise. A single sentence from such a person outweighs an hour of empty chatter. People may overlook you 100 times, but when wisdom flows from your words, they will remember. The Stoics offer practical ways to cultivate this. One exercise is to practice silence in company, to resist the urge to fill the air, and instead let your actions speak. Another is to live with such consistency that those who observe you, even casually, cannot deny your steadiness. Another is to practice being unshaken when ignored, to test yourself by seeing how calmly you can endure invisibility. These practices build a quiet strength, and that strength radiates more than any plea for attention. Consider the challenge. Spend one day moving through the world without seeking recognition. Do your work with diligence. Speak only when it adds value. Carry yourself with calm dignity. Notice how people begin to respond differently. Some may still ignore you, but others will sense something unusual, something magnetic. This is not manipulation. It is the natural gravity of a soul that no longer depends on the crowd. The paradox is clear. The more you need to be noticed, the less presence you have. The less you need it, the more undeniable your presence becomes. To cultivate presence is to build yourself into someone whom silence cannot erase. And when presence comes from virtue, it does not matter who sees, for the strength is already yours. Whether the world notices or not, you are living as one who cannot be overlooked by truth itself. The great paradox of Stoicism is that many of its most powerful voices began in obscurity. They were not born into recognition, nor did they demand it. They lived in the shadows, overlooked and dismissed, and it was precisely this obscurity that forged the depth of their character. To understand the Stoic cure for invisibility, we must look at those who lived it most fully, the overlooked Stoics themselves. Epictetus was born a slave in Phrygia. His master could command his body, mock him, or treat him as property. And for years the world regarded him as nothing more than an instrument for another man's will. He had no rank, no wealth, no title, and no apparent voice. To those around him, he was invisible. But within the silence of slavery, he cultivated a freedom that no chains could touch. He studied philosophy when he could, endured suffering with composure, and began to realize that while others could command his body, they could not dictate his mind. This realization was the seed of his greatness. From the margins of society, a slave became one of the greatest teachers of liberty. His obscurity did not destroy him, it prepared him. His voice still resounds centuries later, stronger than that of the masters who once ignored him. Marcus Aurelius, on the other hand, was no slave but an emperor. To the world, he was the most visible man alive, and yet his most important words were not public decrees, but private notes scribbled to himself in the quiet of the night. His meditations were never meant for an audience. They were reminders to endure, to remain humble, to master his own impulses. Think of this. The most powerful man in the world, commanding armies and ruling millions, still felt the need to remind himself not to chase fame, not to depend on recognition. Though surrounded by endless eyes, he trained himself to be unseen, to seek not the glory of the crowd, but the judgment of his own soul. His greatness lay not in the throne, but in the discipline he cultivated away from it. Seneca's story is another lesson. A man of immense talent, a writer, a thinker, and a statesman, he was both celebrated and condemned in his lifetime. He knew the heights of recognition in the court of Nero, and he knew the sting of banishment when he fell from favor. What did he learn in exile, stripped of titles and influence? That a man's true wealth is found in needing little. He wrote letters of wisdom, not for the applause of Rome, but for the cultivation of the inner life. His obscurity, far from diminishing him, gave him clarity. Through his reflections, he turned the bitterness of being overlooked into writings that would guide generations. Even Zeno, the founder of Stoicism, began as a man with nothing. Shipwrecked near Athens, he lost everything he owned. Destitute and unnoticed, he wandered into a bookshop and began to read about Socrates. From that moment, his path changed. He studied philosophy not to impress others, but to rebuild his life from within. He began teaching not in palaces, but in the open marketplace, speaking to anyone who would listen. At first, he was just another voice in a crowded square, ignored by many. But his persistence, his clarity, and his alignment with truth gradually drew followers. The philosophy that began in the noise of the marketplace now echoes across millennia. These lives show us something essential. Being overlooked is not a curse, it is an opportunity. It is in obscurity that you test your resolve, that you learn to act without applause, that you cultivate strength for its own sake. The world's silence is not proof of your insignificance. It is the training ground where you decide whether your pursuit of virtue is genuine. Imagine if Epictetus had waited for recognition before he began teaching. Imagine if Marcus Aurelius had written only for the crowd. Imagine if Seneca had abandoned his reflections in exile because no one was listening. Imagine if Zeno had surrendered to despair after his shipwreck. None of them would have become what we remember. Their greatness was born in the very soil of obscurity, watered by struggle and strengthened by silence. So when you find yourself ignored, take heart. You stand in the same place where philosophers, emperors, and sages once stood. Obscurity is not the end of the story. It is the beginning. The question is not whether others notice you. The question is whether you are willing to build yourself into someone who does not need to be noticed in order to live with greatness. If you embrace this path, then like the Stoics before you, your words and your presence may outlast those who once overlooked you. One of the most radical ideas in Stoicism is detachment from applause. To most people, recognition feels like food for the soul, and to go without it feels like starvation. But the Stoics teach us that this hunger is not sustenance, it is poison disguised as nourishment. Every time you let applause define you, you surrender your freedom. Every time you let praise determine your worth, you bind yourself tighter to chains that will one day strangle you. Marcus Aurelius warned himself constantly of this danger. He reminded himself that the cheering crowd does not understand him, that their applause is shallow, and that even if they did cheer for him sincerely, the sound would soon fade into nothingness. The applause of men is a poor sound, he noted. It echoes briefly, then vanishes into silence. To live for such a thing is to build your house upon the wind. The Stoic path, then, is to detach, to unhook your soul from the bait of recognition. Detachment does not mean withdrawal from life, nor does it mean indifference to excellence. It means shifting the root of your motivation. You no longer act for the sake of applause, but for the sake of virtue. You no longer create to be admired, but to honor the truth within you. You no longer speak to win approval, but to share what is just, wise, and good. When you live this way, you are free, for nothing that depends on others can master you. How do we practice this detachment? The Stoics gave us tools. One is journaling. Each day, write not of who noticed you or who ignored you, but of how you lived. Ask yourself, did I act with courage? Did I choose justice? Did I exercise self-control? Did I pursue wisdom? These questions are within your control. They place your focus on your own soul rather than on the shifting opinions of others. Another is memento mori, the contemplation of death. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself that soon he would be dust and bones, as would those who praised him and those who mocked him. What then is the applause of men? A shadow, a whisper, a fading echo. To remember death is to remember that recognition dies with those who give it. Virtue alone endures. A third is negative visualization. Imagine for a moment that you will be ignored forever. Imagine that no matter how hard you work, no one will ever notice or applaud. Could you still find meaning in your actions? Could you still live with dignity? The Stoics would say yes, for the value of your life is not measured by the recognition it gathers, but by the virtue it embodies. If you can imagine being ignored and still feel at peace, You have begun to break the spell of applause. This detachment is not coldness, it is strength. Consider the artist who creates not for fame, but for truth. Consider the leader who acts not to be celebrated, but because it is right. Consider the parent who loves not to be thanked, but because love is their nature. These are lives lived with stoic freedom. They shine without asking, they endure without applause, and they leave a mark far deeper than any fleeting cheer. Look also to the modern world. Many of the greatest minds, inventors and reformers were ignored in their time. Their work was dismissed, their voices unheard. But because they acted from conviction rather than recognition, their contributions endured. Detachment from applause made them resilient. It gave them the strength to persist when the world was blind to their vision. And this is the gift of Stoicism. When you detach from applause, you become untouchable. The crowd may cheer or jeer, may notice or ignore, but you remain steady. You are no longer tossed about by the waves of opinion. You stand firm on the rock of your own values. Whether the world sees you or not, you see yourself clearly, and that clarity is enough. Imagine the freedom of this life, to wake in the morning and not wonder, who will notice me today, but instead to ask, will I live in accordance with what is right? To go to bed not fretting over whether your efforts were recognized, but finding peace in the knowledge that they were true to your principles. This is the Stoic detachment. It is not escape from life, it is mastery of it. The applause of others is a sound you cannot control, but the echo within your own soul, the quiet knowledge that you lived with virtue, that is yours to keep. And once you root your life in that, no silence can starve you, no criticism can wound you, and no applause can intoxicate you. You are free. If detachment from applause is the release of chains, then building inner radiance is the discovery of wings. It is not enough to simply stop caring about recognition. The Stoic path calls you to cultivate something positive, something that shines regardless of who sees it. This inner radiance is what makes a person unignorable, not because they demand attention, but because their presence illuminates the world around them. What is inner radiance? It is the glow of a soul aligned with virtue. It is the quiet confidence of someone who knows who they are and lives it fully. It is the strength of character that remains steady under pressure, the calm that endures when others panic, the clarity that cuts through confusion. This is not charisma built on tricks or performance. It is the natural light of authenticity. Zeno, the founder of Stoicism, was not born radiant. He was shipwrecked, left destitute, wandering the streets of Athens with nothing. He was ignored by the bustling crowd, just another broken man in a foreign city. But instead of sinking into despair, he turned inward. He began to study philosophy. He rebuilt his life, not on wealth or reputation, but on the pursuit of truth. Over time, his inner strength grew so undeniable that others were drawn to him. He began teaching in the open marketplace, not demanding attention but offering wisdom. Slowly, people gathered, compelled not by spectacle but by substance. From the wreckage of his life, he built a light that still shines 2,000 years later. This is the path of inner radiance. It begins in silence. It begins in obscurity. It begins with one person's choice to live according to their deepest values. When you are clear about what you stand for, when you live it daily, when your actions align with your words, you begin to glow with a presence that cannot be hidden. How can you build this radiance in your own life? Begin by defining your values. Ask yourself, what virtues do I want to embody? Is it courage, the willingness to face fear? Is it justice, the commitment to treat others fairly? Is it temperance, the discipline to master desire? Is it wisdom, the pursuit of truth? These are the pillars of Stoicism, and they are the foundation of inner light. Then practice them daily. Radiance is not built in grand moments, but in small choices. The choice to speak honestly when lying would be easier. The choice to endure discomfort rather than abandon discipline. The choice to treat another with dignity even when they overlook you. Each of these moments polishes the mirror of your soul until it begins to shine. Speak less, act more. The world is filled with noise, with endless words clamoring for notice. But the Stoics understood that actions carry a deeper resonance. Let your deeds reveal your character. When you keep promises, when you act with courage, when you hold to your values under pressure, you radiate more than any speech could ever achieve. Radiance also comes from steadiness. Imagine standing in the middle of chaos, a storm of anger, fear, or confusion, and remaining calm. Others may not understand it at first, but they will feel it. Your calm becomes their anchor. Your steadiness becomes their reassurance. This is a power far greater than attention. It is influence born from presence. The radiance of a Stoic is not selfish. It is not about shining for your own sake, but about bringing light to others. When Marcus Aurelius reminded himself to live in harmony with nature, he understood that human beings exist for one another. Your inner light is not meant to blind others with pride, but to guide them with example. In this way, recognition is transformed. It is no longer something you crave. It is something that happens naturally when your life becomes a living lesson. To test this, try a simple exercise. Write down 3 virtues you wish others to feel when they encounter you. Not words you want them to speak, not compliments you want them to give, but qualities you want them to sense. Perhaps it is courage, kindness, wisdom, or resilience. Then spend each day embodying those qualities. Do not tell anyone what you are doing. Simply live it. Watch how, over time, the world begins to respond, not because you asked to be noticed, but because your presence became undeniable. The Stoics knew that virtue shines brighter than recognition. Fame is fickle, attention is fleeting, but character is luminous. A single act of courage can inspire more than a lifetime of applause. A moment of justice can echo longer than years of being ignored. Inner radiance is eternal because it comes from within, not from the shifting whims of the crowd. When you build this light, you no longer worry about being overlooked. You understand that true presence is not about forcing others to see you. It is about becoming someone who cannot help but be felt. Whether in a crowded room or in solitude, whether applauded or ignored, your light burns the same. And in time, the world always finds the light it needs. The Stoic solution to invisibility is not to fight for notice, but to cultivate a radiance that makes you unignorable without a word. What then is the Stoic solution to being unnoticed? It is not to shout louder. It is not to bend yourself into the shape others demand. It is not to spend your days chasing the glances and applause of the crowd. The Stoic solution is deeper, quieter, and far more enduring. It is the transformation of your relationship with recognition itself. First, you stop craving notice. You remind yourself that the opinions of others are beyond your control, and to pin your happiness on them is to surrender your freedom. The Stoics teach us to distinguish between what belongs to us and what does not. Your actions, your character, your choices, these are yours. The recognition of others belongs to them, not to you. To need it is to live as their servant. To release it is to reclaim your life. Second, you free yourself from the invisible chains of dependence. You recognize how deeply they have wrapped themselves around your heart. The fear of being overlooked, the joy of being praised, the despair of being forgotten. And then, with deliberate practice, you break them. You learn to find peace not in how others respond, but in how you live. The applause or silence of the crowd no longer dictates the rhythm of your soul. Third, you cultivate quiet authority through presence and virtue. Instead of demanding attention, you build yourself into someone who naturally commands it. You practice integrity when no one is watching. You act with courage in the face of difficulty. You temper your desires and discipline your impulses. You pursue wisdom not to impress, but to live rightly. This steady alignment with virtue creates a presence that speaks louder than words. Those who no longer need to be noticed are often the ones who draw the deepest respect. Fourth, you embrace obscurity as a training ground. You see being overlooked not as evidence of failure, but as an opportunity to strengthen your character. Epictetus in slavery, Marcus Aurelius in solitude, Seneca in exile, Zeno in poverty, all found in obscurity the soil from which greatness would grow. To be unseen is to be tested. To endure invisibility with dignity is to prepare yourself for a light that no one can extinguish. Finally, you allow yourself to shine with inner radiance. You stop fighting for notice and start cultivating a soul so clear, so disciplined, so aligned with truth that it glows in silence. Whether the world turns its eyes toward you or away from you, the light remains. And in time, that light cannot help but be felt. The Stoics teach that virtue is magnetic, that strength of character is its own recognition. The less you chase it, the more it will come, and when it does, it will not master you, because you have learned to live without it. The Stoic solution is not easy. It requires courage to let go of applause, discipline to detach from opinions, and patience to build presence slowly without guarantee of being noticed. But it is the only path to freedom. For what good is recognition if it makes you a slave? And what harm is obscurity if it leaves you strong, steady, and at peace? So ask yourself, what kind of life do you want to live? One that rises and falls with the fickle attention of others? Or one that stands unshaken, luminous in silence, radiant in virtue? The Stoics would urge you to choose the latter, to be content with being unseen so long as you are true, to measure your days not by the applause you gather, but by the integrity you embody. And here is the paradox that will follow you. The less you need to be noticed, the more unforgettable you become. The man who demands applause is forgotten the moment the clapping ends, but the one who lives with courage, justice, temperance, and wisdom leaves a mark that no silence can erase. Recognition may or may not come, but significance does not depend on it. The world may overlook you today, but if you live as the Stoics lived, you will not be invisible. Your presence, your virtue, your light will endure, even if no one speaks your name. For greatness is not in being noticed, it is in being true. And in the end, the world always finds the light it needs. Be that light. Shine without asking. Endure without applause. Live in such a way that whether you are noticed or not, you cannot be ignored by truth itself.